Welcome to Sex, Psychics, and Psychedelics. I'm your host, Banana Jane Garnett. I'm a licensed psychotherapist, a lover of freedom, and an explorer of the mind. I'm here to help you celebrate the healing circus, light up your heart, and bring home the message that we are the medicine. Let's go. My guest today is Erin Tillman, certified intimacy coordinator, sex educator, dating and consent empowerment coach, podcast host, and author of the award-winning The Consent Guidebook. Erin has training and certifications in the areas of sexuality education, DEIB, which is diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, mental health first aid, and Kink/BDSM. For over 10 years, she's been dedicated to empowering singles in all lifestyle and identity categories to have enjoyable dating lives, relationships, and partnerships through personal development and boundary setting techniques. Erin's film and intimacy coordination credits include projects for ABC, BET, CBS, FX, Peacock, and Searchlight Pictures, to name a few. I'm so delighted to have her with me today to talk about intimacy and boundaries. Erin, welcome to Sex, Psychics, and Psychedelics. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Hi, yeah, thanks for having me, Jane. A pleasure to be here.
Well, I'm really excited because I didn't even know about intimacy coordinators until recently. And so this feels like a voyage into at least somewhat new territory that feels like it could benefit all of us. So can we start out with talking about what does an intimacy coordinator do?
Yeah, sure. So yes, as you mentioned, it's definitely been like a hot topic lately. There's a lot of buzz around this position in the TV film industry and beyond. The broad strokes are that intimacy coordinators it's a newer position in TV film, in the TV film business, kind of similar to what a stunt coordinator would do for stunt performers. So essentially, we're there for any hyper-exposed nudity, simulated sex scenes on your favorite TV shows and movies, and we're there to make sure that boundaries are adhered to, and not even just adhered to. We're there to make sure that each performer understands each other's boundaries. We're there to make sure the director understands the boundaries of the actors. But beyond that, we actually are like choreographers a lot of the time too. So we help choreograph positioning of bodies for sex scenes. We also help with if there's say there's a certain part of the body that an actor wants to show on camera or doesn't. We have those conversations, and then those parts of those conversations actually go into their contract or their nudity rider. So we work with the lawyers sometimes for studios and productions. But essentially it's just a position that when you think about all the things you've ever watched in TV or film, it's like, wow, there was never anyone that was in charge of that before essentially 2018, because it came out of the Me Too movement around then. So yeah, it's a new position, and that's what we do. And, shout out to stage theater, because stage theater has been doing this for decades actually. But TV and film was just a little bit behind the curve, and it took the Me Too movement to kind of launch this thing into the realm of everything. So it's a really interesting niche I'm in.
It's really interesting. Yes. I understand very well the idea of, body parts, actors being selective about what they want to show and not want to show. I was curious about what you said about the orchestration of bodies. What do you mean by that? And maybe you could give me a recent example of something that you've worked on.
It's more of positioning of body. So I grew up as a dancer, so it's very similar to choreography or choreography with dancers, positioning, because essentially the choreography of sex for me feels like choreography of dance. It's two bodies doing positions together or in different formations. So yeah, it's we're not, I guess to be even more clear, we're not manipulating anyone's body in any way. It's more of we're kind of a coach in some ways, or we just help with the blocking. I know we get too technical here for the listeners who don't know this realm as much, but with the blocking of positioning based on camera angles, based on, what the director's vision is, all of that kind of stuff. I did work on the final, I have a lot of stories, but I guess I got to be choosy what I'm able to share. But I did work on the show Mayans, which was the spinoff of Sons of Anarchy. The 5th and final season was a couple years ago, and the showrunner producer was really great, like really animated, like boisterous character, who was very generous and very collaborative, which is the best. It makes our job so much easier when we're working with a director, and really just a team who really understands why we're there and sees us as an asset. And so he was like, okay, fifth and final season, opening scene, opening shot. Can we do a big orgy scene of like 50 people? I'm like, okay. I'm like, yes, we can, but I'm one person, so I need to have like a collaborator.
Wow.
Can I bring in a colleague? And luckily he was like, yes. And so, it was like positioning, essentially we ended up having 30 people, not 50, but 15 couples or pairs, like, okay, let's say 14 pairs and then like a triad, doing various things positioning wise, faking it, of course, because it's all simulated. But it was beautiful, and it was a lot of nudity. It was a lot of simulated sexual situations. And the biggest compliment for me at the end was that actors who came in, because everybody's nervous. Nobody's not nervous, even if it's an A-lister, even if people have done this a billion times. Everybody's nervous doing this on various levels. And at the end, people were like, this was so much fun. And for me, that's like the biggest compliment, that if someone comes in nervous, then at the end of the day, they had a really good time, and that's the memory they have of it. Like that's the highest compliment. So, yeah.
Absolutely. You initiated people in the fun of orgies. Well, while
Yes,
staying safe.
yes.
I'm teasing you, but yeah.
Yes, and simulated, but yes. And that's the thing. Really, and, bridging into, my work as a sex educator for a decade or so, it's all about finding the joy and finding how you can relax, who you can relax with, how to be comfortable, to have more fun and pleasure, and just have alignment with people you're interacting with, and with certain situations. Like certain situations aren't going to be for everybody, or certain pairings or certain relationship styles are not going to be for everybody. But it's about finding the fun in whatever the thing is, or finding the thing you are excited about and enthusiastic about.
Well, I'm with you on that, actually. I'm curious, how did you get into this line of work, the intimacy coordination line of work?
The intimacy coordination piece came about, again, post Me Too movement. So like 2018-ish. I've been in television and film for 20 years in various capacities. So I know production of TV and film very well. And then, so this was, 6-ish years ago. So I was, a budding sex educator. I started as a dating coach about 15 years ago. And around the Me Too movement time, I was kind of feeling like I've said everything I need to say. I had a podcast. I was one of the early people that had a podcast way back before it was, but when people were like, podcasts, that'll never be a thing. I had a podcast. And so I was podcasting, I was blogging, I was running speed dating events, I was a matchmaker, and I felt like I'd said everything I had to say. And then the Me Too movement happened. I was like, oh my God, I have so much more to say now. There's so much, it just like opened a whole new door of, just thought and content and theory and practicality that I hadn't thought of before. So that shifted me. I wrote a book called The Consent Guidebook. And then around that time, again, there was this new position I was hearing about called intimacy coordination, which was interesting because it literally felt like it was meshing the two things I'd done had been doing currently and for a while with the TV production piece. So yeah, so then I know there's some entities that do trainings for people who want to be intimacy coordinators. I jumped into one of those during the pandemic 2020, so I had a lot of time on my hands. Good timing. I did a lot of different trainings. I went through several trauma trainings, which I was going to do for my sex education career anyway. but yeah, that's essentially how I got into it. And then, just like anything, I mean, I've actually ironically ended up on TV productions with certain crew members I worked with like 15 years ago, just because the business is so small. So a lot of it's word of mouth, or just other intimacy coordinators that have like too much work saying, Erin, can you jump on this show? Because I'm going to Bulgaria to film this movie. I'm like, yeah, like put me in. So it's still finding its footing in a lot of ways. We did just unionize with SAG-AFTRA, and I was a big part of the unionization process behind the scenes. There's so many parts to this. Oh my God. But all that to say, that's how I got into it. Now I'm one of the people that's really trying to help make it be the best it can be, in a way that has standards that everyone understands. And so that we're working on productions where all of the crew understands why we're there, because that's not the case sometimes yet. It's still newish in that way, but yeah,
I know. I hear you. I mean, I was in the film industry for about 10 years and didn't get to work on too many sex scenes, unfortunately, but a few, and everyone seemed different, and it always felt a little bit dicey and a little bit like we were winging it. And I guess that's my sort of overall question, is how were sex scenes, negotiated before intimacy coordinators? I mean, in my brief experience, not very well. But maybe you could tell me more about that.
Yeah, no, that's, I mean, all of I had never been a part of any sort of, intimate scenes before I got into this job, even though I'd been in production 20 years or, 15 years or whatever. But all that to say, from the actors I work with, it seems like it's just go for it, or assuming that actors have a broad range of sexual experience to draw upon in some way. And it's even more ridiculous in the sense of like, if a director is literally directing everything else on a production, then they're like, just go for it for this. It's like, no, like, why are you keep directing us? Like, I was on a show not long ago, a couple months ago, where that happened, and the direction was, okay, actors, like, here's the camera, here's the bed, just do what you normally do. And the actors were like, what? And luckily I was there, and that's when I step in and say, if you just can you give me like 5 minutes, I can give the actors some positions to bank away. If you want them to improv in this, which the director did, let me give them some things that they can just work with within that. Great, Erin. Great. So
Yeah.
A lot of times directors are really excited to have me there in that sense, because they're like, oh, good, there's someone else that can do this, that has expertise, and phew, I don't have to stress about this or be nervous or shameful or feel weird about it now. So I think I think the impetus has been put on the actors to just figure it out, sometimes because directors are nervous, or sometimes because people aren't totally sure, or again, we have so much cultural shame around bodies and sexuality that why would that not be the case with filming as well? So then that bleeds into it, and then it's just like, oh no, everyone's nervous and we don't know. So tell the world we're there to help directors too. It's like to take some pressure off of them even. I mean, I've had stories of production assistants and first assistant directors telling me they choreographed sex scenes because the director was like, just handle this, just do this for me, or handle this. And it's like, what? They don't know either. Like, of course, a production assistant, like, it's ridiculous. So
that's actually really funny, the idea of the production assistant having to step in and be intimacy coordinator default. You bring up a lot of good points. I mean, an overall point being that we haven't really had the language, and it's been interesting how much our sort of sexual vocabulary has been increasing. And I can see how comforting it would be to have, a sort of a translator in this realm. I mean, one thing I noticed was that actors who were, in the build up to us doing a sex scene were sort of in this funny quandary of wanting to generate chemistry with each other, but also, there were obviously limitations around that. Like, would the chemistry become too much chemistry? Were they in relationships that wouldn't be too keen about that chemistry being cultivated? And it's sort of like, so I think that I observed binds, within actors of like, how I want to sell this. I want to sell being turned on. Should I really be turned on? How am I going to? I mean, it's actually a lot to think about.
Well, yeah, I mean, I've been attached to Days of Our Lives for the past couple of years. The soap opera is in its 60th season. I'm not there all the time. They're usually calling me in when there's a newer actor, usually a young actor. They've had some former Disney, let's just say younger actors that come in and are a little bit nervous. So they'll call me in for that. And, sometimes, it's really beautiful when you have two actors and one actor feels that there's some nervousness from the other actor and they're like, okay, I just want to help make that actor feel comfortable. Like that's the best case scenario. I do have certain exercises, and each intimacy coordinator is a little different in terms of quote unquote tricks they use on set to make actors feel better, to increase chemistry potentially. But I have a lot of I teach a monthly Kink 101, BDSM 101 class, and there's certain things in that I'll use in terms of touch, in terms of getting to know from a 1 to 10 scale what kind of touch feels okay. So if there's like a scene, for example, where maybe it's a more aggressive scene, you can practice and rehearse with each actor and say, okay, if you're meant to grab someone's wrist, grab my wrist on what you feel like a 1 would be, and then you say, okay, now like grab my wrist, let's ratchet it up to like a 3 or a 5. So you can do things like that, or like intensity of a kiss. Let's start at a 1. So like some things like that, sometimes people just don't have chemistry. And, and that's something I have to kind of remove myself from, because I'm not a part of the casting process. I did not do a screen test with these people, so all that to say, there's a lot of variables, but yes. So, to that though, there is a conversation, as long as we have enough time, there's a conversation with the actors before the scene, like not like before, like days before, hopefully, where we can talk about the actual scripted beats and what that might look like or feel like intensity wise. So it's not really, it's kind of negotiated before, because again, we're talking, like I said earlier, body parts, what we want shown on camera, like what certain things, what's the vision of the director. So there are things that are talked about. That's when I get the feeling from the actors of like what they're comfortable with or not. I can kind of work within that then on set. And then if there's something that needs to be discussed, I'm kind of the mouthpiece. So it's just not all this pressure on the actor to be like, hold on, I have a question or concern. It's like, no, they've told me. So then I can kind of be the voice for them if I need to in a more ambiguous way. Like, how about we try this? Rather than so-and-so said that they don't like this. It's more like, hey, how about, can we try this, whatever. So yeah, there's a lot of negotiate, not, oh, what do I want to say? Stealth negotiation and like, kind of like suggesting things,
Yeah. Sounds like you're really facilitating comfortable exploration and expression. You're involved in the organization Sex Positive LA. No, you're not. You were. Okay.
I was. Yes.
Okay, so that's no longer a thing. All right. So can we just talk about sex positivity in general, and what does it mean to be sex positive?
Yes. You referred to, and it's not a secret. I was the executive director of a sexuality nonprofit here in Los Angeles called Sex Positive Los Angeles for 2 years. It was during the pandemic. It was a very challenging position. But the beauty of organizations like SPLA is that they really do create an environment where people can explore and just be in an environment where people can ask questions and explore things around sexuality, identity, getting comfortable with bodies, with like our own bodies, but also other bodies, or what kind of like things could we be curious about or interested in these realms. And I feel like the broader society is not good at, broader society is not good at that at all. There's just a lot of shame around things. We don't want to talk about things. So I ran that organization for a couple of years and learned a lot about a lot of different things. But yes, the idea of, it's interesting because the organization again is called Sex Positive Los Angeles, and so the idea of sex positivity, people see the word sex and think it's, oh, sex for everyone all the time. Oh, when actually that's not what sex positivity is. It's more of, it's even bigger,
Right.
more of, the term sex positive refers to people, like not shaming people for whatever their consensual choices or lifestyles or identities are. Identity is not a choice in a lot of cases, so I want to be careful with that choice of word. But meaning just live and let live in terms of the identities that people hold within sexuality, identity, gender, all the things. So
Acceptance, right? Acceptance.
And not even like, here's the thing, not fully, because you could, if you don't accept somebody, it's not up to any of us to accept it. It's more of like just live and let live. So
Tolerance.
I might be polyamorous, and someone might be like, ooh, I don't really like the idea of that, but Erin seems to thrive in that. So cool. But I think acceptance means that you have to like be okay with the concept. No, you don't. Just like let people do what they're doing over there. Or if people are into kink or BDSM, some people have strong feelings about that. Doesn't mean you have to like it. It just means like, oh, that person's living their life and they're not harming anybody, so good for them. So
got it. So it's more specifically non-judgment.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. That's very helpful. I'm curious what your personal journey is with sex positivity.
Gosh, a moment in my life where it is. I like to be very honest. So I'm in a place where it's deeply important. It's deeply, deeply important. The exploration of self. I think what I want to say is, I think it's important that everyone give themselves grace in terms of whatever journey they're on, and something might be you might really be called to something for a moment in life. You might be less called to it at other points in life, and to have grace around it. I feel like there can be sometimes some judgment around people making new choices around, again, identity or relationship style, etc. So my journey has been, growing up in small town Ohio, not have, having basic sex education in school, the basics, but not
Birds and the bees. Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, but more pregnancy. Oh no, STDs.
Right.
Oh God, all that.
Yeah.
But not knowing like all the variety of options that there are out there. So I came from that to learning a little bit. I lived in Europe for a while, so learned a little bit more about things living in Europe out of college, in college and out of college, and then moving to Los Angeles and really learning a lot in the early 2000s about, wow, people are living so differently here. And, I have a lot of artist, musician, performer friends in my life who just inherently a lot of times live life in a different kind of a way. And so, yeah, I've a Burning Man festival friends. So I was like, wow, this is so interesting. So I was kind of, through friends and people I knew, I was kind of thrust into learning about all these things, which I think was one of the reasons why I got into all of this professionally. Although I would say, a therapist would say that I've always been an observer, even from a young age. I've been curious about why people choose what they choose, or choose partners, or choose marriage, or like, is it really their choice? Like, are we really choosing what we actually want, or is there a outside pressure to do all this? So, all of that to say, my journey, I just feel like my journey, even now, I feel like I am transitioning now into something where I'm more curious about long-term partnership, monogamy. I'm just very curious about a lot of things I haven't experienced, actually, in a big way. Having never been married and had that, but I'll never really be like mainstream person, because I love what I do, and I love being in environments and with people who are living differently, and living in all these different kinds of ways. So I think so that's been my journey. I've been I've learned a lot. I've been to a lot of things. I've taught at a lot of places. I speak at colleges. I've been lucky to have been invited into a lot of circles and spaces where it's people would dream to have some of the experiences I've had. And now I'm in a place where I'm like, gosh, I want something different. And it might be something totally different from all of that. So I'm still figuring it out.
As it should be. As it should be. I hope we keep on being curious and figuring it out.
Yeah. And I would say that most sex educators I know, actually, I think we're deeper than people think. And, we're not having sex all the time necessarily. We're very selective, actually. And like, if we're in some way, if we're studying human relationships and sexuality, it makes sense that we would think deeply about these things. And I don't think that comes because people, if people are coming to your class or coming to your workshop or see this thing, again, this sparkly sex word, people are like, oh, fun, like excitement, like obviously it's like, yes, it can be that, but also we know that it could be really not great if you choose the wrong person or if you're in something you don't enjoy. So there's like a depth that I think people don't necessarily think about when they think of us sometimes.
Well, I agree about that. I don't know. I have never really thought that in particular about a sex educator. I've always thought that sex educators are dimensional, but I sort of am in a way a cuspy sex educator myself as a therapist and somebody who is a sex explorer, I would say. Someone who's always been interested in sex. I feel like there is the sparkly part, and that sparkly part of sex has a really, equivalent, deep, unsparkly, dense shadow to it. And these are all real parts of sex and real parts of the human experience. As high as you can go with it, you can go that low too, because our sense of union is activated, our sense of hope and possibility is activated, and our sense of loneliness, shame, disgust, despair can be activated. And so what a range of experiences within sex.
Definitely.
So interesting. And BDSM is interesting to me in that way because it obviously can be so healing for people, and also feels like, and I don't know this, maybe you can help me on this, it also feels like a place people could also get stuck just doing the same thing again and again, which I think was the original judgment around it, is like, oh, it's just like this sort of fetish idea is that you just have this one thing and it's, whatever it is, feet, and that's all you do over and over again. Feet. I mean, I don't care really, personally. I'm like, do what you want, man. Whatever. But yeah, you've taught classes on BDSM. Can you tell us a bit more about it?
Yeah. As I mentioned before, I teach a monthly Kink for newbies, like a Kink 101 class I've taught every month for the past almost three years.
Where is that class? Where can we find that
Yes,
class?
yes. It's at a venue called 910 WeHo in West Hollywood on La Cienega Boulevard. But there might be some shifts happening with them, unfortunately, again, because these venues, it's really, you need society to support you. And if you don't have that, again, if you're shame-filled, then a lot of the venues do struggle sometimes. So having said that, just 910weho.com, and we'll be popping up all around Los Angeles. But I teach the class is typically the first Friday of every month, and it's just a class. So anyone who's curious, I have a PowerPoint presentation. I'm helping you find out like what kind of kink you could be into, or what kind of kink you might be already. We talk about outfits, we talk about types of parties, we talk about certain niches, certain things you definitely know you're not into, just all of that stuff in an open environment. That's I and my partners at 910 WeHo, we really just wanted to make it welcoming. I was introduced to the BDSM scene about a decade ago, and I mostly was a voyeur at first, just curious about all of it. So I would go and just like observe, respectfully, at different parties and venues, and not every venue is welcoming. At least in my experience, it wasn't. So it's really important for us to make sure people come in, they're so nervous, and it's like, oh man, like, let's just friendly, welcoming, warm. We got snacks and drinks, like come sit down, let's, so it's a beautiful space, and I'm very fortunate, and I'm very grateful to have been a part of it for as long as I have. But to your point, yes, kink can be very cathartic. I feel like the biggest negative I hear is that people think each other are doing harm to each other, which is not, if it's done well, that's not accurate, because everything is negotiated, and assumptions aren't made. I actually have felt the safest actually in environments that do have a kink focus, because I know that there's a baseline understanding in those venues that everyone respects consent, respects the process, and knows that not everyone's going to be into everything. So I like, versus if I go to a regular party on a Saturday night or a bar on a Saturday night, it's like, it's just everyone, and most people, I would argue that most people probably don't have any education around consent boundaries, touch, all of that stuff, right? So, but yeah, I mean, I think there can be I think that even the idea of someone being into something, being into a kink or something, and that's all they want to do, like, I feel like that's more of a mainstream idea. Because, I mean, at least in the kink circles I'm in, and I'm pretty deep in those circles, it seems like there's, I mean, even if someone's kind of known for something, or someone's like into rope or flogging or, whatever their thing is, it's more of a respect around that. I'm like, oh, that's the person who's a go-to for that.
Right. It's more about expertise than about obsession.
Yeah, and I think so could come if you're dating somebody, maybe. Like, maybe you're dating somebody new and they keep talking about feet. Everything's about the foot. Yeah, that can feel jarring for sure.
It could get a little tiring unless you're somebody who feels the same way, in which you just struck gold and like eureka, right?
That's right. Exactly.
So funny. So help me out here. I'm going to ask you just for like a little mini education on BDSM, because these sort of the categories of BDSM, it seems like they keep changing and expanding. Like, what would you say the main categories of BDSM are currently?
I mean, gosh, I mean, here's the thing, like, so BDSM is more of the practice of power dynamics, etc. Kink is, because I did not explain this earlier, kink, anything could be kinky. Like, you wearing headphones could be kinky for somebody. Like, anything could be kinky. So within that, gosh, I mean, there's so many, I mean, even in the class we teach, you could be high protocol, in the high protocol BDSM, where you have rules and structure, and you see a certain person at a certain time, and you have to do these things when you see them, or address them in a certain way. There's pet play, where you could be playfully role-playing as certain, like, primal animals or that kind of a thing. There's service play and service submission, where you're, doing tasks for someone, and then there's a reward for cleaning someone's house or buying them groceries or something. There's sensual play, there's impact play. So I feel like, again, there's not one thing, and I feel like everyone I know in the scene has something that they gravitate more to. Gosh, but I don't know if I personally don't. I'm trying to think if there's anyone of all the people I know, if there's like a couple main things. I feel like rope is a big thing, which is its own niche, and people are obsessed with rope and want to learn about rope and only do rope. But yeah, I just feel like everyone does it in so many different ways. Some people only want to do it with partners. Some people have a primary romantic partner and do kink separately with other people. It's just
right.
Everything.
So it seems like there's so many sort of variations and subcategories. For me, as somebody who hasn't really been involved in it much, I still think in terms of like, oh, there's a dominant and there's a submissive and maybe there's a voyeur. So I like, those are the sort of, and the voyeur thing's interesting because I didn't actually just went for the first time to a dungeon recently with a friend, and I was like, oh, I don't know if I should come because I don't know if I'm really into it and I don't know which role I would be or whatever. And they're like, no, you can just watch. I was like, oh, is that a thing?
Yes.
I was like, oh, that's amazing. You can just watch and you're allowed to watch. And A, that's super interesting. And B, it gives you the space to be able to see what you're drawn to, which isn't necessarily what you think you would be drawn to.
Yeah. Yeah. As I mentioned before, I mean, when I first got into kink 10 years ago, I was just voyeuring. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I just knew I was fascinated by, I think a friend brought me to a dungeon. I was like, oh, there's this, I think it was like a burlesque night or a karaoke night at a dungeon. And they were like, oh, that would be cute. And then we went and I was like, whoa, like what is all this? And specifically for me, like as a Black woman being in the space, I was seeing like dominant women. And that was like, whoa, wait a second. Like, this is crazy. And I'm so fascinated and I'm kind of intrigued now. But I'm seeing women like run the show or, be, again, having negotiated or doing certain things and like to a person spanking or let's just say for the sake of this, like spanking or doing something to someone, sometimes men who are excited about being submissive. And I'm like, it just like blasted through any like ideas of gender and gender roles and societal roles. And I just became so fascinated with that piece of it. I mean, so a lot of my exploration in these realms has been around the empowerment feeling actually. And again, like you mentioned before, for some people, I've tended to be more dominant in kink spaces during my exploration, which again, because for me, it just felt so empowering and so fun and exciting to meet people who enjoyed me in that position, in various ways.
Was this, I have to just interrupt, was this the first time you'd experienced yourself in that way?
Yes. I mean, I think I've had tastes of it. I've always been an outspoken leader type person.
Yeah.
So I think it was just like a venue or vehicle for me to explore it more playfully. But I mean, just in the streets, people are like, oh, she looks like she knows where I should go to find a coffee, or like, hey, I'm just that person people think.
Yeah, but that's really interesting because some people are that person. Like, this is true, I think, for a lot of men who are really powerful. They're leaders all the time and then they're just dying to have someone pee on them. Do you know what I mean? And like, and so a lot of people who are dom in like outside world, whatever, default world in their jobs actually want to take a load off. I think it's really interesting that, you're a dominant leader in your daily life and you were attracted to this. And I love the idea that you're attracted to it not because necessarily it was a sort of hidden thing or a alternative thing, but actually just because it was your thing. So it was your self-expression. And that's really lovely.
Yeah, I mean, as I mentioned, like I'm shifting a little bit just in my life at the moment. Yeah. So I actually am seeking more now, just interactions in my life where I can relax a little bit more and I'm not in charge or leading. I really did thrive in that for a lot of years, though. I really did. It's really great. And so now I'm in a place where I'm like, God, yeah, I'm actually more curious about what it would mean to be a switch. So being a switch, so you switch between being dominant and submissive, depending on the partnership or the time in your life or the venue or the event. You're not just dominant or submissive, or top or bottom. So I'm actually in a more switchy place lately. And with some people exploring more submission and bottom energy. Because again, I just, and that's why I want to make sure like people listening, like, you can change, you can shift, this freaking world is so changeable and dynamic and there's so much going on. So, why shouldn't we give ourselves that kind of grace too, if we're just curious about something new now? We feel like we've explored all we want to with that thing, and now maybe we're curious about this thing now, and that's okay,
100%. And I'm curious if you've had any moments of insight going from being going from domination to submission. have you had any realizations about the different
Well,
positions?
I haven't fully embraced submission yet, so I don't know if it's fair for me to answer that question.
Okay.
I'm
Okay. Okay.
curious about it, and again, back to the sex educator piece, I'm highly selective. I know too much. I know a lot. Not everyone I would not entrust, and that maybe that's helpful for people here too. I would not entrust just anyone to dominate me. Absolutely not. And in what way? Again, there's a billion different ways to be dominated or be submissive. So I don't know, and I think I'm still I'm doing like a deep dive on self in that way, but also relationship wise, like romantic partnership wise, professionally at the moment as well. I feel like I'm being drawn to, ironically, as I'm talking about submission and relaxing, I'm actually feeling more of a draw to policy and making high level decisions professionally. I think part of intimacy coordination, like helping us unionize with SAG-AFTRA, I really enjoyed being in the room and helping like figure out what we're going to negotiate and that kind of a thing. So, and again, I mean, there's a whole other bridge of conversation around, again, the high level conversations around how society views all this and how society does not understand a lot of it. So I don't know. 2025 is going to be interesting, I think, is the point. Because
I
it's like
definitely
it's
feel
all
that.
shifting for me right now.
I can't wait to see where it all goes for you. I mean, it does seem like it is always shifting. And actually, I remember getting out of being in a marriage. I got a divorce and I was single again. It was 10 years after since I'd been single. And the world had changed. And this was about 10 years ago. And I went back into the world of, casual sex. And my partners were saying, okay, so what do you want to do? What's your plan? Like I was supposed to have some kind of like sex plan. And I was like, oh, don't we just like make out and see what happens? Because that was how I always did it. And I actually didn't really like it. Like I didn't really want, now I feel different because I understand a bit more where it's coming from, but I didn't want to have to think that hard. It wasn't just laziness, it was unromantic to me. And most people would say, well, casual sex isn't romantic, but I don't necessarily agree because I think sometimes getting to know a stranger in that way is an incredible thing and deeply romantic to my own sense of freedom. So, so I didn't necessarily like the sex plan, and I felt that it was kind of pornified. I felt like we were already looking at how it was going to look when you did that to me and I did that to you, and it was almost like the cameras were on already, and that was weird. But it definitely made me think, and it also made me think, okay, well, I'm also a little tongue-tied around what I want, and maybe in this case what I would want is to say, actually I don't want to have that kind of conversation. I would like to be more fluid. I would like to just see how things go. I would like to just start with some gentle kissing, and I don't want you to assume that you can put your tongue down my throat or whatever. I mean, I now have a few more words.
Yeah,
but it's not, it takes time, right? So I'm sure you run into this. Is there any advice you have around like the articulation of desire and how to get better at it?
well, I think it's really interesting what you just shared. Actually, it's pretty powerful. I mean, you saying, at some points that I actually understand when you're saying like it felt like pornified or something to have it laid out beforehand or talk about beforehand. I mean, everyone's so different with that, and so I think that old Erin, like when I had my podcast again like 10 years ago, I would have said, no, like talk about everything before. But now I'm in a place where I'm like, just choose people who are okay with whatever way you want to do it. Cause I feel you. I mean, I've had experiences that were very short term or, like somewhat spontaneous with people that were some of the most sensual connected moments I've had. Again, that would not be the case with just anybody though. I chose, we chose each other, but at various points I've chosen people who I could just kind of tell there was going to be an energy or they were going to be really present with me, even though we didn't know each other that long. versus I've been in longer term relationships where I felt like the person wasn't present at all and didn't know how to, move my body or touch me in a way, even though we've talked about it. It's like it still doesn't land in terms of it really registering how I like to be touched, even though we talked about it. So I think it's an individual or a pairing, how the pairing is together. Excuse me. But I really do feel like, that's where the self work comes in, like getting to know self and knowing like what thing you prefer, what way you prefer. Do you like it to be more organic and, in the right moment? Like I've had partners where I had a partner not long ago that was like, just what are the cheat codes? So for those of you who are video gamers out there, the cheat codes, you get to the next level if you have a secret code or whatever you tap in. So he's like, what are the cheat codes here? And I was like, so I would just give him certain things of like, well, I generally just general, like in a general way, I like this, or I love when people do this, or I love when somebody does this, or I love when someone touches me like this. So it wasn't happening right then, but it was like kind of a flirty, just getting to know each other during dinner dates or between dates via text. I mean, this person was playing it real smart because they were like, oh, okay. And so they just were filing these things away, for later when the time comes with him. But again, it's different. It's different for everybody. So I would just say, so many people, I feel, and this goes back to like my dating coaching days. I just feel like a lot of people, because we're not taught to, haven't done the deep introspective work. And it doesn't have to be so deep, but just take moments and figure out like, what do I actually like? What kind of touch do I like? What kind of environments do I like? What kind of qualities in other people really get me excited? What, like, like if we're talking about like sexual touch, like, even if, because I feel like there's a lot of people in my life who are going through a drought right now where they're kind of, they've not had intimate touch in a while. So this is a great time then to draw on past experiences. Like, what were the things I really liked with that past partner? Like, what kinds of touch did I enjoy? What places did I like to be touched? Like, what environments made me feel really sexy or sensual or, made me feel really relaxed? Because I feel like that's a thing for a lot of people too. Taking out the BDSM piece, but no, I'm going to leave it in, because even if you're negotiating a scene where something's like more intense, I would argue that you still have to be able to relax first to even negotiate it. So, what are the environments or who are the people, or what kind of energy makes you feel relaxed to even enjoy the most intense thing you want, or whatever, right? So those are the questions, like the self questions, I think, that are really important to even get to quote unquote maximum enjoyment, I guess. Like, and so a lot of people, I think we leave it sometimes up to our partners to just figure it out. Like, they know me, they should just figure it out. Yes, I do feel like there is an organic piece of that. Here comes a siren. I just want to call it out. But also the piece of like, I think it's really, I don't think it's fair for us to assume like our partners should just know us. And again, like I said, like I'm using myself as a great example. I'm in a really deep place of change right now within myself. So if I've had a partner in my life for some years, like the things that worked before might not work anymore. So it's just really important to have some communication, and then within that, throw it out the window if you're like, let's be spontaneous tonight. But overall, you have some idea. There's been some communication around who I am and what I might like or not like,
I love that. So yes, know thyself
Yes.
as much as possible. And then as you were talking, I was also thinking about that kind of the negotiation stage. And you gave that lovely example of the guy who was doing it in a way that was really sexy, right? It was part of a seduction. That's awesome. Sometimes it's going to work out like that. Sometimes it might be something different. But what I was thinking about was the talking part of sex is still sex in a way. So if someone is not able to grasp your tone, your language, your requests in the talking part, or if it's just like really unsexy in the talking part, it might just be really unsexy. I think you can kind of get a little, I think the talking part can be a little taster of what it might be like later. And I think if that part isn't flowing, that might be some good information. I mean, look, it could be your own, you could be insecure and you could be feeling awkward, but you want to see, can they receive that?
Yeah,
and make space for that.
I mean, I agree, and also I would pitch that sometimes people might communicate differently, and so getting to like maybe trying to see if there's a way that they prefer to communicate about these things, or maybe their flirty style, maybe they're not good with words, so maybe they're better in person around body language, or maybe and I want to shout out accessibility differences here as well. Maybe someone has communication challenges, but again, is there
right? They might be an amazing lover. Yeah. Is there a way you could be like, can we touch hands and see?
Yeah, or
something like that. Yeah.
What is the way that is going, like, what is your flirty style, so to speak? Because there are different ways that you could have a flirty style, but yeah, I'm with you though. I mean, I feel like one of the things for me, and it's not a deal breaker, but like if someone can't have like fun, playful banter, because I'm a wordsmith, like I'm talking all the time, like I love words, I love how you formulate a sentence, all those kinds of things. So I'm like, oh man, like if someone can't do it, so okay, but what else do you bring to the table? Because maybe you have another special skill that makes me not miss the banter as much,
I love this thing of being open to people's special skills. I think it's highly pragmatic. We don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater.
That's right. I am a very pragmatic person. It's true.
Yeah, I need to hang out with you more often, seriously. We're going to wrap soon, but I want to just ask about play parties, because that's something a lot of people I think are interested in and may or may not have been to. Can you just like tell me something about what happens at a play party?
So, gosh, again, there's so many different kinds of parties, or what would be in the category of play party. There can be play parties. So I'll say it like this. I think what I want to say is, for people who are curious about play parties, and especially haven't been to one, make sure you get as much information you can. Because especially like in Los Angeles here where I live, I mean, there's such a range of things. Some things can be more debaucherous without a lot of rules. Some can have a lot of rules and parameters, which makes some people feel safer. And then you're safer to do all the kinky, sexy things, but that there's some general agreement to what can and cannot happen in the space, versus some that are just like, well, we don't really have a lot of rules, or have no rules. And it's like, some people might choose that, but just safety, as an educator, like safety is always really important. I just want to make sure people are safe. So whatever you're consensually choosing is great. There are some kinky events that are sexy, and let's break down the word play real fast. Play can mean a lot of different things. Play can mean sex. Play can mean kink. Play can mean like festival, burn, music, DJ, naked dancing. I mean, it can mean so many different things. So again, read the description or talk to your friends and see exactly what it is. I feel like there's a miscommunication, or a misinterpretation of that. Sometimes kink parties always have sex, which isn't the case. Sometimes kink parties are just kink stuff, which isn't like sex acts specifically. So versus like if something's like a swinger party or a sex party, it usually is sex focused. So I know that I tend to let's just say, for the sake of time, like I've tended to be drawn more to play parties where there's not just one choice or one option. So I don't usually thrive at parties where it's only sex, or that's the only thing that's like, if you're not having sex and it's weird. I actually like parties where you have options of sex or kink or naked dancing, or like that. For me, that just feels like, because I don't really know how I'm going to feel in that moment. Like I could plan weeks in advance to go to this amazing, whatever, immersive, sparkly, whatever in the desert. And then I might get there that day and be like, oh man, Like, I'm just not. So as long as I feel like
Totally.
so for me, play party, like big play party, that means there's maybe rooms or options for people within that to again be wherever they feel in alignment and not feel pressure to do
Mm.
anything. So I mean, play parties can be at venues, it could be at people's houses. I mean, again, it could be in the desert. I mean, so it really could be
Okay, yeah. So
where.
so get the information basically.
Get the
Yeah.
information and again, tap into self,
Mm.
and please talk to your partners, because
Right.
again, your partner might have like been excited, like a month ago planning this thing, and then they're still thinking, oh yeah, we're gonna have like this whole, and you're like, actually I'm in a different place, but do you still want me to go with you? Are we still going? Can we shift maybe what the first intention was, or can we be open to all of these intentions? Because I've seen it happen a bunch where it's like, oh no, but you said we were going to go
Mm.
to this thing and it was going to be this. And it's like, yeah, but leave some room for someone's desires to shift a little bit, or just to be on the journey together. That's so important.
Erin, this feels like this theme that's been kind of like running through our conversation has been about the kind of the versatility of desire and making space for it. And I love that. And I'm completely with you on that. The last thing desire wants is to be put into a box unless it feels like it. So I'm going to wrap up with a couple of questions. The first is, what is your wish for your work? Go to town.
What is the wish for my work?
Yeah, your
Oh,
wish for your work. Yeah. Talking of desire, your big D desire for your work.
oh wow. Oh man. I don't know. That is such a big question for me in this moment in my life. Um, I think I want to say, like, to be valued for this profession, for sex educators, intimacy coordinators, all these things, to be really valued and compensated appropriately. And for just broader society to value us and see how much how important we are to like individual growth, actually. And actually, I would say even like peaceful society, because I feel like when people have pent up sexual energy and don't have outlets for it, or feel shame about who they are, it can come out in very violent ways and in very toxic ways in society. So I actually think that the work that we're doing, the big desire, I guess, would be for people to really understand that this work is deeply important to like keeping society together, actually.
Yeah, I'm high-fiving you over the screen here. I, I, I couldn't agree more. I think it's deeply important work. And my last question is, if your heart had a party, what would it what would it be like, look like, feel like, sound like?
Gosh, in this moment, at this part of my life, I think it would be, gosh, that's a really beautiful question. God, I almost want to be emotional about it. Like,
Please.
soft places, feeling really just support in every way, energetic support, lots of people around who are just enthusiastic about who I am, what I bring to the table, people wearing furry, sparkly, fun things, um, warm night air, warm pools of water, deliciousness in all the ways. Yeah, I think that feels correct at this moment.
Thank you. That's such a beautiful heart party. I'm gonna
Mhm.
hold that space for you and your vision to manifest beyond. And if you want to be found, where should we find you?
Yes. So my website is erintillman.com, ERINTILLMAN.com. And I'm very active on social media. So, Instagram mostly, that's the main one. I'm at, shout out to my dating coach past, at Dating Advice Girl, GRL, Dating Advice Girl with no I in girl. And I'm on TikTok assuming it'll still be around, at Miss Erin Tillman. But yeah, Instagram is, I'm very active on Instagram, but yes.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for coming on the show. It's been
Yay,
such a
it was
delight.
so fun. No, thanks for having me, Jane. Really great.
Beautiful.